We're off.
We're off. Well, the first thing, Tony, is obviously we're here to talk about the forthcoming orchestral Project 7. I suppose the first thing is, when did you actually decide to record an orchestral album as a part to...
Well, I'd sort of, after the last Recording All Stations sort of thing ended, I was just writing my normal way I was, you know, and I had this sort of thing, this idea which is just all done on a string synthesizer. And I thought, you know, rather than trying to sort of make it into something that I would do myself, I thought, well, what about the idea of trying to do this, you know, with real strings, see how it sounds. And once I got that idea in my head, I thought, well, you know, let's see what else I can do. So I started writing some other pieces, specifically thinking in those sort of terms, and also allowing myself, you know, the first time for quite a while really, apart from, you know, to just let it go where it will really, not trying to tie, you know, trying to make things into sort of verses, choruses or anything. And it's the way I feel most comfortable writing anyhow. I like to sort of just go from piece to piece. And it just seemed to really lend itself to these kind of things. And I just, you know, 3 or 4 of the pieces I wrote sort of very much around that sort of time. Well, they sort of came one after the other, if you like. And once I got a few together, I thought, you know, if there was anything from the past that I could also include. And I'd always had this piece along, which I wrote years ago, that I thought if I ever did anything with an orchestra, it would probably be good. I mean, I kept it back as a possible film theme over the years, but nothing had ever come up. So I decided, well, I'll do it on this, you know, and expand it a bit, really make it slightly less sort of thematic in that way. And I had another older piece that I did, a short piece that I'd done around the time of Strictly Inc. And put all those together really, and then decided I need another piece because it was all a little bit slow and soft, and I'd try one slightly more bouncy kind of thing, and wrote that specifically for the project. That was the most recent one. But all of it was completed. I mean, the actual recordings were done in 2002, and I'd already done it. I re-recorded it because I'd already done 6 months before, and I'd done a few months before, and I'd done 4 of the pieces. And the pieces have been around for a while before that. So it's just been quite a long birth, really just trying to find out how to do it, you know, getting people involved and seeing the record companies and stuff, and just find people who'd get behind it.
Yeah. I mean, how did it, it's probably a rather silly question, but how does it actually compare to work with an orchestra after all the years of working with the band? You know, what are the biggest differences that you noticed, apart from obviously a broader canvas to paint on, I suppose?
Well, the main difference is the recording stage, really. Just that the recording, you're doing it, you know, you record the whole thing in 2 or 3 days, and with you're recording it to an orchestra who've never heard it before, they have to learn it, and at the same time as you're hearing it back, sort of for the first time, done with real instruments, you know, and stuff, and there's so many changes you have to make. There's always typographical errors which take up. All these things take up a lot of time. So, you know, and I said it, I've said it on the album and everything, but you know, after 3 hours, you've got to have, say, 10 minutes of music done, otherwise you failed. And I mean, if it's very slow, sort of simpler stuff, it's not too difficult, but if it's taking a little bit for the orchestra to get it's really quite a strain. And I did find the first sessions, which is why they didn't really, I don't think they turned out as well as they could. I was just so rushed, I didn't realise quite all the things I'd really have to get together. Because, you know, as you have not just sort of typographical errors, obviously, but then you're criticising kind of harmonic things you don't think are right. You're still got to worry about tempo and just mood and everything, you know. So much to talk about, and you find yourself constantly having to say sort of, oh, that's, you've got to change that, that's not right, that's not right, and it's sort of so negative, and it's a very difficult thing. And I did realise that to do it, I really would have to, because I thought once I'd done them, I thought maybe once I listen to them back home, I'll think this is fine, that's good, you know. And it was just I didn't get them how I intended to, really, and a lot of the things that I allowed to go through because I thought, well, maybe they're okay. Well, it wasn't right. I should never have let it happen, you know. And so when I went to the second time, I got as much together as I possibly could. But not post. Long time a day.
Just the period.
Yes.
So I take it for the demos that you did, you said you multi-tracked them, they were quite detailed. In so much as you can sort of...
Oh yeah, in terms of arrangement, I mean, a lot of what you hear is there. I mean, my brief when I worked with Simon Hale, I wanted him, we weren't going to change any structure, any notes, any basic harmonies, melodies, structure. That was all going to be 100% how it is. And obviously any obvious arrangement ideas that I'd incorporated, you know, he would use, but he would do, you know, more with it because he understands how an orchestra works better than me, really. And I thought, well, you know, and much as I love doing everything myself, as you know, over the years I've played all these instruments rather badly. But you know, I would like to have done the arrangement. I think on a couple of pieces I could have got away with my arrangements absolutely as I did them. But in fact, you know, he definitely enhanced everything. And where he didn't, I was able to say, well, I don't think this is right, I'm going to redo it. But I mean, he did some lovely things that I think are good. And they make what I wanted him to do was make it sound convincing as orchestral pieces. That was the most important thing to me. I didn't want this to be some kind of hybrid. I'm really not very fond of that kind of thing anyhow. I don't think I've ever heard a sort of band orchestra combination that I thought was very good, or all orchestras playing the band music. You know, I didn't like the London Philharmonic, what it was on.
Do we know what we like?
Yeah, I didn't like that at all, and I didn't like things like Deep Purple and whatever, and things. I'm told there's some German one that's out at the moment that's supposed to be quite good, but you know, I don't think it could never work, because there's no doubt that sort of like, you know, violins used in rock songs over the years have sounded great and things like that, but it's very difficult to do an extensive piece, I think, because they have such a different feel of rhythm. That's the first thing you've got to cope with.
Yeah. And so when you actually started all this, you actually wrote the demos originally on piano, just solo piano?
Well, no, some were on piano. I did, I think three or four of them were on piano. The others were done on, two of them, one was done on just on the string synth. It's just the second piece, Black Down. And obviously the piece I did, I suppose I did most of them demoed on the piano. I mean, the other one I didn't do was piece called Earthlight, which again was just done with the string synth, but I also set the thing up so that I could play some other sounds, mainly sort of, you know, oboes and a bit of brass and things, just to make it more, embellish it slightly. So that's how I put them down. The piano, and I used a pretty artificial piano on the first piece, Springtide, which actually was one of the biggest problems, was to try and recreate the effect of the piano part, because I used the piano, I sort of mided it with a sort of very belly, tinkly kind of piano, but I put it an octave down, so I had this octave split on everything, and it was very difficult to work out, doing the thing, which octave sounded best, you know, and to try to get it, and it was a bit of a struggle. I'm not, you know, there's a couple of bits that don't sound quite as good as they would do if you had the double octave effect, but you couldn't do it somehow. It didn't work. I tried doing it with piano, just double octave, and it just didn't work. You know.
What specific keyboards were you using in the sort of the writing stage?
Well, usual, really.
Usual.
Mainly sort of
not sort of purchased any
piano, and then lots of. Well, I was using the orchestral sounds, so emulators and stuff like that. Mainly at the time, and I've got these virtual instruments now, but at the time it was emulators, and sometimes I was just using whatever came to hand. You know, I wasn't necessarily trying to get 100% faithful.
Sure.
I wanted to get, if I wanted to, you know, because I would use any instrument that was coming up. But the one I use for the slow string parts, and I've got this O1W sound that I've used, which I think is a great sound, just for. I find it very easy to write with, but it's got a very slow attack. So everything I write on it is very slow.
What slow strings is it or something?
It's one of those ones, And probably, I mean, slow string sounds reasonable, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's one of them. Yeah, it's a B57 or something. It's a standard.
One of the factory
well, it's
presets.
just factory presets. Nothing special about it at all. I just find it a good one to write with. I quite like it too, and I just sort of mid it up with the piano. And it just tootles along in the background while I'm playing. Gives you an idea of how big a sound would be.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I mean, I'm not a musician, so this is sort of really probably over, some of it will almost certainly be over my head. But the one thing I have great difficulty imagining and conceptualizing is how you've managed to take a demo recorded on a piano and envisage what the finished piece would be like with an orchestra.
It's not that different from doing something with a band. You know, you've got to imagine everything else that comes with it. And the nature of keyboards is that you are sort of replacing an orchestra. I mean, if you're playing any sustained instrument, you're sort of doing a lot of the work. And I listen a lot to classical music, so I mean, I know how it's put together. It's just a matter of, you know, when it came to every detail, I knew that I would get stuck and the things I wouldn't think about. And I also thought just having someone else having a sort of, you know, if he was compatible, looking at it as well, would sort of introduce ideas that wouldn't occur to me, which would work. And I think, you know, I certainly think he really did enhance some bits, and that was very well worth doing.
And how did you link up with Sam? How did you get to
he was someone that he'd worked with Nick Davis on a thing. He'd done some arrangements for a couple of things that Nick had done in the past. I don't know why I know that, you know. But he also He's actually he's a great keyboard player himself, and he's worked quite a lot with other people. But I didn't know anything about that. I just heard his arrangements, and I thought he sounded interesting. I quite like the fact that he did have a foot in both camps. He's a very musical guy, actually, and we just got together. He liked, he was into it and talked about it, and he seemed to come up with ideas very quickly. And you sort of got the music very quickly. And I've worked with people over the years. Some people, it's quite a struggle for them to understand what's going on, and others get there very quickly. I've worked with people who are sort of brilliant, like Nick Kershaw, for example. Is just so musical. He just knows everything that's going on immediately. Where some others I won't mention, where it takes an awful lot more to sort of get the idea across. And and it was great with Simon. He's like me in some ways because he talks very fast and his mind is working all the time on the things, and he seemed to get it very quickly.
So bouncing ideas off each other.
Yeah, well, we did when we got to a certain stage, but
Yeah.
I kind of, very much gave, sort of, initially I'd give him the pieces I had, having a bit of talk through them, saying roughly what I'd seen. Then he'd go away, sort of try some stuff, and we'd come back and we'd sort of, work it through then. And, some ideas would come, some would go, and other things would happen. But it's not really until you get right into the studio you realise some of the things that are not working, and you have to try and work out whether it's the writing or it's the playing or whatever,
I suppose a lot of it is trial and error, but were there any other pieces recorded for this that didn't end up being used?
No, I used all pieces.
All?
At one point I wasn't going to think I thought I might leave one off, but I thought, well, they all sound fine, and I think I was a bit worried at one point because I said, but the piece I wrote is the most recent was the fourth piece, which is sort of called the Ram, I think I called it. Which is much more up-tempo and got more optimistic, a sort of more rhythmic thing. But without that, it was, perhaps it's quite slow, which is sort of what I like best. I'm a adagio man, But once I got that in there, I thought I could sustain it, really. It was a question whether I had both of the shorter, quiet pieces in, but I think it's good to have them, actually. They sound good.
I mean, listening, we listened to... We made a slight detour yesterday to Carol.
Oh, right.
And she very kindly provided us with a copy of the album. We listened to it a couple of times, and the one thing that gets me is, obviously, as you've just said, you listen to a lot of classical music yourself. How difficult was it for you when you were actually putting this stuff together with the orchestra to try and avoid, if you did avoid, the influences of, say, well, that sounds like Rachmaninoff, that sounds like Elgar. I mean, you sort of conscious of any of that?
No, I don't. I never worried about that ever, actually. Over the years. I think what I found with the group as well, whenever we've tried to sound like anybody else, we haven't really succeeded. We sort of sound like something sort of in between, which works okay, which sometimes can be quite effective in itself. Yeah. And in this now, I'm not doing no direct influences. I mean, obviously everything I listen to has an effect, but I'm writing melodies that I feel I haven't heard before, So the way I put it together, I don't have any feeling that there's any sort of plagiarism or anything going on. After you hear the thing, that you can hear certain things. Everyone says it's got hints of some of the English composers and stuff.
Oh yeah,
there's Ormans and Elgar and stuff like that. But I don't think in terms of there's no direct kind of melodic moments you particularly say, well, that's that or anything. It's just sometimes the style can be
a bit similar to them. Yes, it's. I mean, there are a few things as well. I mean, now that you've finished this album, I mean, is it something that you could consider possibly doing again as another project?
Well, yes. I mean, I'd love to do more of this. Really, I think it'll all depend on how it's received. How it's received a bit, and everything, how it goes. Because it's. I mean, I don't know really. I mean, in all honesty, what I said to myself was after the Calling All Stations thing, I thought to myself, that I'm not sure I really want to carry on doing this anymore, being a professional musician, because it's the solo stuff has always been a bit of a struggle in terms of having to, every time you put one out, it's kind of never gets a great response. And then when we did the Calling All Stations thing, and obviously to some extent there was some similarity to doing a solo album where it was a more subdued reaction, if you like, than what we'd had in previous albums. So it was kind of I wasn't sure I wanted to do it, but I said what I'd always promised myself, so before I put my boots up, I'm going to do an orchestral album. I always wanted to. So I've done it.
Yeah. Well.
And if at the end of all it all goes sort of, nothing much seems to happen, then that may well be it. I know no particular. If it goes great, I'll probably do that. Or next 6 months' time I might feel like doing another rock album. I don't really know,
Yeah.
kind of stuff. I'm not. I was in no hurry to do another album like sort of Strictly Inc or anything. I thought, well, what's the point, really? I think I would struggle, in all honesty, to get any kind of major label behind me if I did it now. And okay, that's much less important than it was. But I just don't know why to go through all that fighting. It's just you go through the fighting, you get the thing out, and then you get smashed on the head by every critic in the universe. And it's not a great feeling. I just enjoy it. I love making records. I love it. I love writing them. I love making them. But putting them out can be a bit difficult. Now with something like this, it's very different. And I just what I would like with this is that it is heard by people who might not consider listening to this kind of thing in the first place, and listen to non-Genesis fans in many ways. Also Genesis fans, and I'm very happy for anybody who hears it and likes it, but I think it has a possible appeal that is wider than that. And hopefully, if I can reach it a bit. But it's very difficult, it's not associated with a film or a TV series or anything.
Yeah, but the great thing is it's with Naxos, and they're remarkably good at getting music to people that sometimes wouldn't necessarily think about. Well,
there are 2 or 3 advantages they have. One is, they're very kind of positive kind of company. The records are cheap too, which I think is good, because it means people can sort of say, well, on a whim, they can say, well, give it a go.
Well, I love the comment on the back of the sleeve where it says, why pay £15 for one classical album when you can get 3 from Naxos for the same price?
Right.
And that is an incentive for people to give it a try.
Because you can hear stuff, and they do this sort of what they call 21st century
composers. Yeah,
they're just people who are around, and also the other thing is I did find when I was talking to 1 or 2 of the other record companies that unless they get big sales, they weren't really interested.
Yeah.
I talked to EMI, and I said to them, how much did I said, well, how much did Steve's album sell? And they said, well, as a sort of yardstick, I thought, they said it sold 15,000 about. I said, well, that's fantastic. That's really good. If I sold that, I'd be very happy, And they said, well, they're not really interested in putting out something that just sells that.
Yeah.
A company like EMI, they want to sell 100,000 because they want to subsidise the kind of slightly classier sort of classical composers they've got who sell 600 copies, but nevertheless have a very strong sort of a reputation.
Yeah.
And I found that a little bit difficult, really. So then I naturally went to EMI in the first place because I thought that, and they were helpful. They were friendly enough and helpful, but it didn't come to anything. And finally, when it came to Naxos, it was after reading an article in the Saturday Times, when it was talking about the sort of the people who are prepared to take more chances and who are trying to do slightly different things, and they came across very well in that. And they were really enthusiastic right from the word go. They really liked it.
No, the thing that gets me is everywhere you go. I listen to and buy a lot of orchestral and classical music myself. I grew up on the stuff, and the great thing about it is Naxos records are everywhere.
Yeah.
They're not just stuck in your HMV or your Virgin Megastore. You'll find them in department stores, bookstores, service stations. So in that case, there is no excuse for anybody saying curiosity. If it is only for curiosity, and at the price that they're going out for, you can't really lose.
Well, I sort of feel that, and I just feel that people who've known me in the past, might say, "Oh, I'll give it a go," or people who, and then people who say totally outside it, who just sort of. So there are people who will just buy most of what Naxos produces, particularly if they give it a high-profile thing, which they're sort of making this quite high profile. So yes, all that will help, I hope, but ultimately you then have to see what people think of it when they get it, It's,
of course,
whether they like it. Well, that's the stage I'm at the moment, really. So and obviously the other area it could lead into, I suppose, is the film thing, because obviously when you're telling people you want to do film music, they kind of, you've got no pedigree really, apart from it's years ago since I did the ones I did before, and they don't necessarily trust you. It's a bit, they want to use someone they know, and they don't say with you, they didn't know that if I can actually do it, produce an orchestral piece. So at least this shows that I can do that. Yeah. So that from that end there might be something in that zone, which is something I'd quite like to do. I think. Right.
So it was a conscious decision to almost steer clear of it being a piece for the piano supported by an orchestra.
It's just not. I know it sounds silly, but I'm not really a piano player. I'm not really a pianist. I don't really think of myself as a pianist. I never have done. I play the piano because in Genesis, back in the very early days, there were 4 of us, originally, and we each of us played the instrument that was most logical for us to play. Peter played the drums, I played the piano, Ant played the guitar, and Mike played the bass. Now, Ant and Mike were both guitarists, but Ant was better than Mike, so Mike played the bass.
Right.
No one else could think about playing the drums, so Pete played the drums. And I was a better keyboard player out of Pete and I. So that's how it happened. I use it as my writing tool and everything like that, but I always think of myself first as a composer.
Right.
And it's far and away the greatest contribution I've had to Genesis. Far more important than what I've ever done as a player.
Yeah.
There's been the cinema shows and all the rest of it, but that's one thing. It's the writing of pieces, and right through the spectrum of Genesis stuff, simple stuff to complicated stuff, and as lyrics and stuff. That's what I've done. And so what I wanted to do on this, I didn't want to play piano on this at all. I didn't even think the piano was going to feature, because I was going to try to take it all off the piano. And although when I finally worked it out, we reckoned there always had to be piano in the first piece, Spring Tide. There wasn't intended to be any piano in the other two pieces, but the way that I played on, I played on 3 on the piece. And it's pretty background on the other two, and it's really just done there to kind of give it body. Because particularly on the last piece, The Spirit of Gravity, where I felt that I was least satisfied with what the orchestra did. I tried to some bits definitely were well enhanced just by putting the piano there, although it's subliminal at times almost,
Right.
But it doesn't need piano. It shouldn't have piano on it, as shouldn't the other piece I played on, which is the Ram, which has also got piano on it. But they weren't intended to have piano on them.
I think when you hear the other pieces, I think you're exactly. It's very true that it doesn't necessarily need to be there. But I'm just wondering if you ever had one of those sort of childhood dreams of performing in front of an orchestra. Well,
no,
so you don't.
No, the last thing. Performing in general is not my favourite.
Yeah.
thing.
No, I know.
Probably know. So no, I've no desire to do a piano concerto. If that's what you mean. I mean, if it kind of came to writing a piece where I felt I wanted the piano to to lead and be more extravagant, but it's not. It's not the music I like. I'm not. When I listen to music, I like symphonic music really, orchestral music mainly. Certainly the odd piano-based piece that I do like. Obviously, particularly players. People. I mean, there's Rachmaninoff's piano concertos, Ravel's piano concertos, and various bits and pieces like that. But they're not really pieces that I would. Even with Rachmaninoff, I probably prefer the symphonies. And I mean, maybe I'm unusual in that, but I just the piano sound doesn't necessarily I'm not a great fan of the piano as a sound in itself. I don't listen to solo piano music much. It doesn't do that much for me.
Well, that's the question I think was on the websites.
Yeah, well, it's just a thing.
consider
I don't. I'm making it sound like I don't like the piano. I mean, the piano is my favourite instrument to play, and I love it as an accompaniment, particularly within the world of rock music. I think it works great. Leading an orchestra. Obviously, you get things like Shostakovich second piano concerto, things like that. I mean, lovely pieces, some beautiful pieces where it all really works. But it's not, in the same way as I'm not really a violin concerto man, although there's some marvellous violin concertos. There's something about all that I don't really like. I don't really like this virtuoso stuff. I find that very tedious.
Right.
When people start doing all this fast stuff, I lose interest.
You just like the orchestra
I tend to like slower pieces.
Yeah.
If the orchestra can be rhythmical together, then that can be very effective, I think. So that's what I was trying to do with this. I really just wanted to the slower. I don't know. It's the speed my brain works. I suppose. Really. I find slower pieces more
I didn't
interesting.
quite get that impression last night listening
Not
to
really,
it. It was
no.
slow.
Yeah.
I thought there was sort of a
Well, there's two
tempo.
faster things. Well, there's there are some faster pieces. I mean, again, I like. I don't want to overemphasise this because I like fast stuff as well. I mean, I've done it many times over the years, and I think there's something quite exciting about hearing a person play fast and things like that, if it all works. But just in terms of writing, I love chords, you see, and I suppose you could give them a chance to kind of linger a little bit. If you move off a chord too quickly, then it gets a bit awkward.
There are some classic Banks chords in there. There's some.
Well, they
beautiful
follow me around.
transitions.
I can't. It hasn't really. It's there's certain things I like to do, and I always like to try and there's certain key. It's always the chord change into a thing, which can set it up. If you have the right sort of change and the way the real release, by having a particular chord key change happening when you play a significant piece. I've always loved that when I've heard it in other people's music as well, and it's something that will come out. Comes out a lot in this, I think.
I mean, Carol mentioned yesterday that there's the prospect of the Malvern Festival. This being performed by the orchestra there.
Looking to think we've got to try and find out got to get the score sheets together.
Yes, she was having problems with that yesterday.
I mean, the piano parts. You see, I'm in because I didn't I played all the piano afterwards onto the things. So a lot of the things I couldn't just play the old parts I played or anything. So it was a question of finding out what would work, and so often I stop and start quite a bit. And so now I've got to listen to the tapes and find out what it was I played, and someone's got to put it onto
transcribe it.
Simon had transcribed.
Probably. I mean, simpler. Or I could play it into a
which
thing, but it's probably easy. In all honesty, these guys can do it so quickly. It's probably easy for them to do.
It's just, I think obviously, I think this question was asked on the website interview about the prospect of, once again, live performance.
Well, the live performance thing, obviously, in terms of, I have no particular desire to play it myself, and I think it's also quite difficult because it's not, if I was the sort of lead thing, it would be easier to do in a way, but it's very much part of the orchestra. I mean, it's one of those things where the orchestra's, the piano's stuck in the middle of the orchestra, it's not out the front. And so obviously live performance is fantastic. Of any kind. And I think the most interesting area probably would be for the one or two pieces to be taken out of context and played in another concert, because that would introduce people to the pieces in a way that you're not preaching to the converted to such an extent.
And just play it without the piano part in.
Well, no, they put the piano in. The piano would just be part of the orchestra. The orchestras often use piano. A lot of symphonies use orchestra. They use piano. I mean, originally, in fact, when we did the first version of Springtide, we used the orchestral pianist. But then it seemed in a way almost silly. If there's going to be piano there, it wasn't complicated, I might as well play it. But it was, and also meant I had more flexibility really, because it was, you can choose. The only thing I could actually change once I came out of the studio was the piano, which was quite useful because it meant I could do a few things that weren't done before. But I didn't want to fake anything else at all.
I mean, the great thing about it, as you just said, it's an orchestral suite. But it's not one, as you say, where the pieces can't. They do live on their own. They're not.
Oh yeah. Well, they were written. As I said, the two of the pieces were written well outside the period of the rest of them, and I don't see them as. That's why I call it 7 really, rather than anything else, because it means that they are separate pieces. They're not supposed to be particularly linked. I gave a slight linking in titles of 2 of them, but apart from that, there's no real linkage.
Yeah, I think it's certainly. Say, first couple of listens yesterday, I could certainly imagine. I just actually put myself in my local auditorium, the Philharmonic Hall in Liverpool, with the orchestra there playing it. I think, they'd love this. I think certainly if an orchestra's prepared to do it, and if Naxos are prepared to actively get someone involved, it could actually, see.
Well, it's not so much to do with them, really. I mean, it's going to come more down to me if it happens. I mean, well, 2 things. Obviously, if people come to you and they want to do it, they like the more than thing. That's great. But if I think one has to wait a little bit, see how things go. If you get a little bit of action, then you can suggest it places, because a lot of people, to do one piece here or there, is not 10-minute piece is not going to be too much of a problem.
What sort of promotional work are you doing then to push this in?
Well, it's just been radio, to talking to people. I have and will talk to people. Well, anyone really. In terms of radio or press, who are interested. I mean. You obviously they kind of only will do interviews if they like it, I suppose. I'm going to do Classic FM as obviously it's quite useful. People they seem quite keen on it. So
is there no way of publicising and putting on an event yourself with the London Philharmonic?
Well, you could do, but
getting a venue. And
you must appreciate that to do.
Is it costly?
It's extremely costly. It's extremely costly to make the record in the first place. I mean, not in terms of making a rock record, but it is extremely costly,
Do you mean that the recording days?
The recording, just because you've got an 8-piece orchestra, they just a lot of things. Now, to get it to the standard of playing on the record, it took, say, the 3 days, if you like. Right. To get it so you could play it on stage, I think would probably take more like 10 days, if the 3 days only to go by, well, it'll certainly take twice the length of time. But it's not a problem with the slower pieces. It's the real problems are the 4th and 7th pieces. They're just, particularly the 7th, which is tough, and it's recorded in quite a few sections. That really just to get it right.
Spirits of Gravity.
It's difficult. It's just that it does go through. Tempo is kind of the way the time signatures work is kind of strange in it, and yet it should sound natural. I mean, some bits sound more natural than others. When I played I played the whole thing on the piano originally, and it all worked great. Getting with the orchestra, the problem was that the brass players just got slower and slower. So by the time that end theme is that bit, it was so much slower than I originally intended it. and I also wanted to have those strings arpeggiating with the brass players, but I just couldn't get them playing in time. So I just changed it in the end and just went with it and said, okay, let's make it slow and ponderous and add the strings to the brass and just make it a big fat
Philharmonic
thing.
Orchestra, you couldn't get them playing in time.
Well, it's different idea of time, I suppose.
Right.
That's the truth of the matter. It's probably, if they'd heard it, it's difficult. These guys, if they've heard it before, if they go in there and do Beethoven's Fifth, they've heard it a million times. They know what they've got to play. So then the conductor's just working on his interpretation of it. Sometimes they have no idea, and it's got some aspects of the rhythm are a bit alien to them.
Right.
There's one bit in that final section which they couldn't get the feel of it at all. And fortunately, though, the lead violinist, you got the hang of it, and he showed them how to do it. And from then on, it was fine, no problem. There's quite an important rhythmical part, which is a lot of the last part of the piece has in it, and that sounds great now. But those kind of things. It's just different. It's not. It's not. Obviously, these guys are brilliant musicians. There's nothing they can't do or can't play. But it is just getting that sort of the rhythmical feel of a whole group orchestra together is very different to what happens with a.
They've rehearsed the piece. They've recorded the piece.
But I suppose that must be the thing. Is, as you've said, it's the fact that these guys have played Beethoven's Fifth Symphony or whatever, hundreds, thousands of times, and it's almost second nature. But this, it doesn't matter if they've rehearsed it for 3 or 4 days. 3 or 4 days rehearsal compared to how many times they've played some of those pieces. It's like walking on the moon.
It is quite difficult. But obviously these guys, they're used to doing this because so much of the stuff they play is film music and stuff. They're only playing it. They only ever play it at one time, and it's not really a problem. And they could learn it all and everything and do it. It could be done, but it is. I'm still not quite sure that's the best way of doing it. I mean, if I did it, I could play it, and it would be great fun to do. I might be able to sell a festival hall or 2 out or something like that. Yeah. But you then are playing to the converted, aren't you?
Mm.
It's only of so much. It's fun to do, but that's all you're doing really. I think you want to try and do it. What I want to try and do with this is to try and sort of reach a little bit beyond my normal audience. In a way. I mean, obviously, you want everybody to like it. I suppose is the point. And I think an area which perhaps this could appeal to is a sort of there is an area of there's a lot of people who sort of my age, if you like, who liked Genesis when we were sort of all the same age and kind of moved off a little bit and don't really listen to pop music very much now anymore, or at least only to old things. And I think those kind of people are listening perhaps more to sort of things like Classic FM, possibly Radio 2 and stuff. And they if they heard something like this, it might interest them.
Mm. I can't wait to put it on at home for my parents and just not announce who it is and just put it on and say, let me know what you think of that.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see the response you get from.
Hopefully, depends on anything. It's expect a trick, but no, it's I think it's I'm happy with the way I'm pleased with the way it sounds in terms of I think it's just convincingly orchestral. I don't think it sounds the natural thing. I mean, there's actually a very good review on Amazon of this thing done by the Amazon people themselves, which is great. But the one thing they do say is obviously it could be. Some people will dismiss it as being kind of like film music, really. But I don't actually think it, I think it's not that, because I think film music is all about themes and things like that. This, I think, very much is about developing from one section to another, which is something which is, what all music is about. I suppose all classical music and lots of the sort of more involved rock tracks we've done is a sort of like, is taking people through things.
I think film music has to work to a formula.
It's a different thing, film music. I won't say some of these themes couldn't work outside film music, in films, but the idea is it shouldn't sound like too much like film music. I think it's. But on the other hand, if people like it, then that's not really a problem.
Yeah, I think at the present moment the curiosity factor is obviously there. A lot of people are, looking forward to the release of it. Me included, and as far as I'm concerned, from first hearings, okay, I am one of the converted, so is Mark, but
we can still listen to it.
We try to be honestly constructive in it. It's not just a case of, oh my God, it's Tony Banks, we've got to love it. It's a case of if it's music of genuine merit, and music that I think will genuinely appeal to that broader market that you've been.
I'm quite surprised that it actually is as the appeal. It has broad. It's more accessible than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
When I was writing the stuff, I actually thought, I was a couple of times I was trying to sort of, steer it a bit away from it. Then I hear it back and it sounds. Yeah. I think the nature of orchestras is that in fact when the chords get a bit funny, sometimes it doesn't sound so peculiar. When you're doing on a guitar, and often you've got sort of guys struggling with a shape here, or something, and it sort of, there's a way it sort of sounds a bit strange. But when with the orchestra, you always kind of lead the person to the next chord of it. You anticipate slightly, or something happens, and some of those slightly stranger shapes, that sound very, very normal, and so I'm just surprised in a way that it sounds. I thought it would be more obscure than it's turned out.
Just a few quick fire questions. Any time during the whole project you thought this isn't working, or it's not going to live up to my expectation? Or
oh yeah, many times. I mean, the first sessions were the most depressing time for me when I went in there. I mean, I was a bit nervous before I went in, really, but I wasn't quite sure what to expect. And the first time I heard the first piece back, I thought, I'm off. I can't take this. This sounds so awful. And then we got it sounding a bit better by the end, but it was very uphill, really. I felt, and I felt very, you always have a bit of inferiority complex because you've got all these kind of, these guys, these classical people around you and stuff, and you're trying to sort of do it there. And I think I found that very difficult. And when I came out of it, I thought, and I listened to it and I thought, this isn't good enough. What do I do now? Can I really get this together? And I went through loads of things, and then I got in touch with Nick at that point, Nick Davis, and I thought, well, let's try and work out a way of doing this. And I thought what I would do originally was to actually do piano versions of all the pieces that I could, and get them to just play to them, to build it up artificially, really, almost in a way. And I did some quite extensive piano versions of all the pieces, and which were all right. And then we got to the stage back into the thing. I sort of was going to start doing it, if it didn't sound right. And then the first piece we put on, and immediately it sort of sounded pretty good without anything. And I think the other difference was having this guy Mike Dixon, who's the conductor. Again, he's a guy who straddles both camps, and he's working with does the Queen thing. We Will Rock You. He's the
director for that.
And but he also does. I think having those people plus Nick and everything, the whole thing became a lot easier. Really, I also had other people who kind of like to put forward my side slightly more. As a part, I didn't feel quite so in awe of everything. And it just sort of came together much more easily. So yes, I did really think of giving it up at that point, and particularly since the response, the initial record company response, which wasn't Axel's prior to all that, wasn't very good, and it was quite a tough moment. I also saw an episode of Frasier about that time when he was doing this thing. He had this jingle. I think they wanted a jingle for the radio station, and so they'd all done the things, And he did this thing when he got the Seattle Philharmonic Orchestra, and he'd done this sort of extravagant thing, and I thought, God, that's what I've done. This is terrible. And his father then, sang some little thing, which is what they ended up using as the jingle, which is much better. And but anyway, I got over that really. But you've got to really stick at your sort of things. That some of the people out there are thinking, oh God, he's only doing this because he's got the money or whatever. But you just have to fight through all that really, and be confident that you think it can sound good. And when things did sound good, and some of the orchestra guys were very enthusiastic. Some didn't give a shit. They just, some would be sort of play a couple of brass sticks and read the Sun. But that's always the way that it is, really, which is fair enough. And you can't get them enthusiastic about everything. But having said that, the lead players, I think particularly the sort of flautist, who's quite extensively featured, I suppose, and a lot of that sort of stuff, was some, when they were showcased, they took it seriously and they did a great job. I was someone on a bank of violence half the time. You watch these guys, and of course they don't all play all the time. If they're not quite sure what they should be doing, you see them sometimes just sort of miming. Because there was one thing, where the notes, we had this bum note, we sort of kept coming out from somewhere, And I think in the end the person just stopped playing it because they just, but it was. But in rhythmical terms, for example, there's one sort of not very difficult but slightly faster kind of brass riff that occurs in the Ram again, which we did as overdub because we had to really, because we just couldn't, we just were taking too long to get it right at the time with everybody else, and it just didn't seem the point really. But other than that, everything was done sort of natural, all played at the same time.
And when it was, I was going to say opposite to the lowest moment, when you say you nearly packed it in, the highest moment I presume was that final day when the take had been done. And
well, yes, I think there are moments all the way through. I think when it was being recorded and it's sounding good and you realise it's working, and it's actually moving you as an audience member, That's exciting, really.
It was Lyndhurst, was it?
What? Lyndhurst, yeah. Lots of moments where it happened like that. I mean, particularly, my favourite piece is Black Down, the second piece, and when that kind of just once you finally got the sort of important theme in that, sort of, which is the main theme, I suppose, but it only occurs sort of a couple of times, but it just has to sort of really do it. And when it was really did it, because in the first versions I did of all these things, when I did them at Abbey Road, when I did the first sessions, the main problem was that none of the big themes were delivering at all. They just didn't sound very good. The rest of it was sounding all right in a way, but you come to the big moment and it was that's no good. So that was obviously very critical, because the piece builds to a moment, and if it doesn't get there, then it doesn't do it.
I think I'm out of questions, I think.
I just want to know what Mike thinks. And has Phil heard it? Any comments back?
I've heard
Carol's seeming quite enthusiastic.
Yeah, Carol's Tony Smith's been very enthusiastic.
Yeah.
Mike, I don't know, I'm not sure that Mike's heard it yet. He may have heard it. He hasn't said anything to me about it. Phil certainly hasn't heard it, I don't think. I'm not sure it's really kind of his cup of tea. I was interested. I gave it to 4 friends of mine, who've all been, into things I've done in the past, and who also I thought would appreciate this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I had one guy who said it was fantastic, brilliant stuff. Another guy said it's not bad considering it's your first time. And the other 2 people I've never heard from. And I see them quite often. So I kind of presume that they weren't too impressed. So, that's kind of the way it is, I think. It's not going to be everybody's thing. But I think also the other thing is you're never quite sure how to react. If someone gives you something like this, you don't know. It's a bit of the Emperor's New Clothes stuff, isn't it? You're not sure whether it's how good is it. You kind of need some corroboration somewhere. I think this might be true of critics and things. They'll say, well, I don't know, it doesn't sound bad to me actually, but I can't say this is any good because it's a rock.
That's it, exactly.
You're going to get a lot of prejudice of that kind. So you have to sort of you expect that a bit, really. It's like when I get the Times things, and there's the guys who write the reviews and those things. That if it's Paul McCartney's done anything actually, but particularly if he's done an orchestral piece, they're going to hate it. You know what I mean? As soon as you see that thing, and it doesn't matter. It'll be the same. John Lord, Rick Wakeman, no matter who it is, they're all going to get bad reviews regardless, I think, in those sort of circumstances. So I fully expect that kind of treatment there. But there will be some people who are a bit more sort of open, maybe. I did a couple of classical magazines recently where the guys were very enthusiastic. So.
Well, maybe those 2 friends that you gave it to were just hopefully giving it a few listens to
before they give you their considered opinion.
I gave it to them quite a long time ago.
So I'm just sort of
one's a very close friend, and I see him quite often. So I don't dare sort of say anything. So what do you think? I'll give him another copy too. Maybe lost it.
Or can I get back?
No.
I'd be interested to find out what Anne thinks of it.
I don't know really. It's sort of thing. I like it.
I think it's the kind of thing that it's the kind of thing he enjoys doing himself anyway, if he had the opportunity. So
well, that's the problem, isn't it? You get that slightly from some people. I have 1 or 2 friends who would love to be able to do something like this. That's the thing. You have the ability to do this. Yeah. And there are a lot of people out there who probably, if they had the ability to do this, could do something very, very good. But it's just getting it all together. It's getting the backing. And most of this sort of stuff is done. You get a sponsor, really. That's how most people do it. Obviously, I'm able to be my own sponsor, I suppose. But it's quite tricky to get to find someone who's going to let you have enough,
give you enough leeway to actually do it the way that's hopefully satisfying for you, and also gives them a result as well.
I think it's been great, very lucky to be able to do it actually. But
are you still listening to it? Yeah.
Do I listen to it? I listen to it all the time actually. I think it's great. It sounds really good in the car.
I'm glad you said that.
I tend to be. There are a lot of people I know some people say, "Oh, I never listen to anything I've ever done in the past." I've always listened to things. I still listen to some even old things.
Curious Feeling. When was the last time you listened to that?
I listened to that for a while actually. I thought for a long time I thought that was much the best thing I'd done, and then I kind of at a certain point I wasn't so sure really, and I think I particularly I said individual songs from albums now really. Still I think stands up pretty well. But I listened to a bit of Bank Statement the other day. I thought it sounded really good. I don't know. It's kind of. I think I'm a little bit contrary anyhow in the sense that if a thing hasn't done well, I sort of like it more sometimes. It's sort of.
Why not?
Well, because I sort of it's sort of got missed. There's certainly a couple of things on Bank Statement, particularly. the more I hide it. And I'll be waiting. There's two songs that I think are really good songs, and I think would have been good in many other contexts. And it's a shame to sort of see them kind of just, they're just not really there. But I mean, you're bound to think that if you don't like your own stuff, you can't expect anyone else to like it.
That's
so
true.
You might as well like it a lot.
Very true. That's very true. But I think.
But you haven't played, from what I can gather, you probably haven't revisited the Genesis catalogue and played Genesis albums. So
well, we're doing these. We're doing these 5.1 mixes at the moment. So we've been doing the Lamb recently. We've listened to a lot of the Lamb and Trick of the Tail recently. No, I do. I listen sometimes to them. I enjoyed the album I enjoyed the most was the second Archives album, actually, just because it had all those B-sides on it.
Right.
Because I thought some of those tracks were really good. I mean, On the Shoreline was one of my favourite tracks from We Can't Dance, but I was shouted down by the other two. Wouldn't let me put it on. I thought, God, it's so much better than that. We had the awful Since I Lost You on that. Things. I can't understand why we didn't have Shoreline. The other one too that's good on that is that Hearts on Fire is a good track too. And those two I think should really have been on that album, because I think there's a couple of moments on We Can't Dance that really are not as good as the rest, but it's that's just how things worked out at the time. I mean, it's funny now because I talk about to both Mike and Phil think, they're great tracks, you should have put them on. You bastard! It wasn't even like that. I wasn't really even much that I'm doing. I just thought it sounded great.
As long as they end up on the SMCD, I suppose.
Well, they're there. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Well, this is the other thing is whether on the 5.1 things whether we put some of these other tracks back on or not. I don't know really. I haven't quite decided that yet. Obviously, Lamb is complete in itself, but there is on something like Trick or Treat, for example, there is It's Yourself. As the same sessions, and also it ties in with Los Endos. But
what's the reluctance? Where does that come from?
Well, I just think you left them off because you thought they were weaker,
right.
And therefore you don't want to weaken an album. So by putting just more stuff on just for the hell of it, because these might become what you call the definitive versions of these albums in the future. And I certainly wouldn't want to put something like Match the Down on Wind and Wuthering, because I think it's a crap track. But on the other hand, Pigeons was good, I think, and the other one, Inside and Out, was good as well. So you could put those on. It's just but then you get selective, and and then you think, well. But we did always say at the time of Wind and Wuthering that we thought it would be quite good to have had the simple tracks on, because it became quite a heavy album that, because we got all the sort of big tracks on it, and we thought maybe if you'd been able to put the simple tracks on, it might have slightly changed the emphasis of the album a bit, and might have been quite good in a way. But it's.
So you were there yesterday, I believe, listening to them.
Yeah, the Lamb. We listened to finally put the 5.1 all together. And
I presume it's pretty impressive. I mean, you've heard some
I've heard bits of it when I did an interview with Nick a couple of months ago. It sounded great.
Well, we tried very hard to not make it sound, not changing it radically at all from the original. It's the same, to casual ear, if you're on a radio, it would sound kind of similar. But you can make everything sound a lot better. I mean, particularly the bottom end, the drums and the bass, especially. But also you can get everything, and also you can use the 5.1 a bit, get a bit of.
Well, I think certainly the key thing for me, because I knew nothing about 5.1. That was the first time I'd ever heard anything on a 5.1 system. Being sat there in the middle of the control room, and Nick put 2 or 3 of his favourite bits on. The thing that got me was it was as if I was in the room when you guys were writing stuff, because it comes at you from every direction.
Yeah, it does. It does. It's principally fantastic. You get the back to sort of gives you a kind of acoustic sort of help. I mean, it's good fun.
You get everything. I mean, you get far greater detail.
But I mean, there's tracks. Coming back to something like Trick of the Tail. What's interesting is the tracks that are sort of perhaps best known off the album, which is Dance of Volcano, Squonk. I mean, they don't sound half as good as the other. I mean, the best sounding track, Entangled, sounds beautiful, as does Mad Man Moon. I mean, those two tracks. And to some extent Ripples, although Ripples is not the verse part sounds really good. I'm not so sure about the middle part of it, but whereas Volcano sounds okay, but it's just I don't know. It's a funny thing. It's some of these. I think it's dated more, to be honest.
Because it was performed so well live.
It sounded much better live. That is true in a way. I think, and I think it's also that Phil sang the softer songs in those days a lot better than he sang the loud songs. It took him a while to get really used to singing with power. So that slightly you get that, I think, on that, but it's a good album.
And how far back are you going to go?
We'll keep on doing them. We'll sort of do them all in the end, I suppose.
Right.
There are some albums that will change more than others in terms of sound. Obviously, anything prior to Lamb will probably, you can improve quite a bit. even Lamb, we hurried a lot when we were doing the final mixes on that because we ran out of time. And I think also the ones we did, particularly Duke, I think can sound a lot better than it does. Just the mix. It's just that I think that we did that in Maison Rouge or whatever, and that wasn't a very good studio. And so the resultant sound is very lacking. I mean, we had to really beef up the bottom end for when we did the remasters. We did what we could, but you need to really go back to the tracks to get the sound right. I think particularly things like Behind the Lines and Turn On Again could sound a lot better.
Are you more actually involved than Mike in the sort of quality control or actually in the sort of remastering process?
No, we both do. I suppose I probably always slightly care slightly more. I mean, I've had slightly more time on my hands, I suppose. So I focus on all these things. Well, I mean, like in terms of the archives, the selection of tracks, and I'm much more involved in that.
While on the vexed subject of our archives, I mean, the webmasters mentioned this trip back through memory lane for live recordings or wherever of...
Oh, right, you mean old things?
Yeah, the old things. I mean,
to put them on to put them out so people can... Well, we've talked about this, yeah. We do have a lot of tapes, actually.
Yes, I gathered that.
I mean, hundreds of the things, actually, from quite early days. And also there's of course, the rehearsal tapes too, but I mean, I don't know. Yeah. We were slightly surprised. The one thing that didn't get particularly good response off the archive album was the Mama we put on, with the song. Yeah. And I thought that was really good.
I think that
one of the things I enjoyed the most.
I think the biggest problem with that is the fact that I think people would have liked more. It's the fact that was just one track.
Actually, we couldn't really looking for the Home by the Sea stuff because we got 3 reels of that improvisation stuff at the end, which we sort of selected out. Those bits,
I think that was the criticism.
We couldn't find it. Yeah. But the really all we came across was that Mama, and we thought it was quite fun because it sort of showed how the middle obviously wasn't developed to that point, and just sort of showed it a little bit. And there was a couple quite nice little extra bits that were quite nice. I thought. I just thought that would, if I was, I would have thought I would have liked that more than anything else if I'd been a sort of a fan. But I'm not sort of. I found it quite intriguing. There was another Abacab, but it didn't really sound much different to the Abacab that we had, so we decided there wasn't much point in using it.
I mean, these obviously these are the things. There's been so much discussion amongst people. What's there? Just if it's possible, you mentioned that there's plenty of live recordings.
Well, the live stuff's not a problem.
How far back?
I'm not sure quite how much. We've definitely got quite extensive stuff from certainly from sort of Trick of the Tail onwards, I would guess.
Yeah.
But there are some stuff from before that as well.
Yeah.
Because we came across another version, because there's always these things of the Lamb, multi-track recording of the Lamb. Of course, did have it on it. This one, so we could have used that.
From?
I'm not sure actually. Can't remember. No. Somewhere in England.
Oh, probably be Wembley.
I don't know. I couldn't remember. Yeah, I don't know what we recorded at the time. Can't really remember quite where it turned up from, but. Obviously, it's not that radically different from the one that we've got, the Shrine one, But in terms of cassettes, board tapes, which I suppose what people are mainly talking about, and we've got an awful lot of them really. So some of them, I mean, one would just put them out warts and all really, so people could hear all bum notes.
So I think you've, as I say this about quality control, and you say about putting out the SACDs, which are you don't want to sort of lower the.
Well, that's right.
But I think these releases, I think they're sort of hitting the fans, aren't they? So,
well, to some extent, but as I said before, they could well become ultimately, if everybody sort of switches over to these things, because obviously they've got stereos on them as well, so you can play them on a regular CD player.
I remember more sort of the archive releases, like the soundboards and those.
Well, we did the archive. We did those 2 archive albums where we put an awful lot of tracks that some people sort of, we can't put that on, but we did.
Yeah.
I mean, we each had one we didn't want on really very much, so. Someone as Phil really objected to me and Virgil going on, I think because he read the lyric and he felt a bit self-conscious about it, because I think it's quite a good, musically it's quite an interesting song. I wouldn't have minded that going on, but I really, Match of the Day, I just think it's one of the worst things we've ever done, so I just, I was mainly responsible.
Yeah.
I really can't stand it. Yes. It was the lyric I think is the most embarrassing in the universe, but also the I just was just kind of used much the same riff as I'd used on Carpet Crawlers, but it's sort of...
So you're involved in deciding which shows you consider putting out?
Not really, no. Well, that's something we've got to slightly sort out the website, which is not quite very satisfactory at the moment.
Quite a hefty response. But
yeah, well, people would want. I know that we could do it, and obviously one would put them out, and I think it'd be a way of. We always seen it as a sort of way of financing the website, really, in a way, because the website does cost us quite a bit of money. it would be, something to do just to make it sort of tick over. And I know people would enjoy it, you put
I'm
out
glad
these
you
things.
recognise that, because...
I know
yeah.
people want it. It's
Yeah.
just, it's a matter of organising it all, really. And as I said, at the moment, the website, I'm not totally happy with the way that it is at the moment. And so, once we've sorted all that out, we will do that.
Excellent.
I'm not personally too bothered myself, but a lot of people are asking for the reunion show.
Well, then there's
Would you have any qualms about...
I don't have any qualms about it. It's just that we're not... No particular plans at the moment, I don't know.
It's one of those
I'm
things that may or may not happen.
I have to say, it's not something I'm particularly itching to do one way or the other. But Phil always seems quite keen to do something, and I think Mike and I probably would be happy enough to do it.
So is Peter the stumbling block?
Well, with Peter, if you want to go back to do stuff with Peter, nightmare. Have all that lot back together again. The Milton Keynes thing was bad enough. I love Pete, it's fantastic. But Peter's, it's just doing...
I think Carol said, well, is it Tony, the manager, would love to see you all back in some form?
Yeah, but
I don't
he
think it would have
just
to
sees
be-
dollars,
Yeah, that's what we thought, yeah.
I'm also not sure it's quite the right moment. I mean, I know that you're converted people, but I mean, I just don't think the band at the moment is very hot. I really don't think it is. So I don't think it's a good moment to do it. It may well happen in 5 years' time. I think the problem is no one quite knows how to judge us because because of the Phil Collins sort of look with the period. If you like, people sort of say it and they tend to equate it a little bit with Phil's career, and obviously he's sort of, particularly in this country, his reputation is sort of like a bit iffy, I suppose. And then there's the sort of Peter era, and he's sort of deep and all the rest of it. And it's a kind of a bit schizophrenic. No one's quite sure. I mean, I from where I stand, it's something totally different because I only see the Genesis stuff. I don't really, I'm not that acquainted with everybody else's stuff, and I listen to Pete's stuff and things a bit. So it's a totally different career for me. But I can, I can't deny that something like In Too Deep sounds a bit like one of Phil's tracks, but most of the tracks don't really. Even the sort of some of the more up-tempo tracks, the things the simple ones like Land of Confusion or whatever, I don't think they really sound like Phil particularly. It's just that because people get used to, they sort of because of the shape. That's right, and they sort of a lot of people can't remember which is which anyhow, which is fair enough from their point of view. They don't differentiate. So I think that's always going to be a bit of a problem for us. Certainly for as long as Phil has quite a long. It did work for us at one point very strongly. I think now it works against us. Particularly with Phil kind of doing things like the Disney cartoons and stuff. I think it just changes the whole thing. He's become quite very middle of the road now, which is fine. I mean, he does it very well, which takes us away from any kind of. We were at one point we were a progressive, edgy group, and of course you can't really do that. Equate that with Brother Bear, So it's just. So I don't know really. You could go back to the period with Peter and do something or anything, but then it becomes, I can see. It's okay. I don't know if I want to put myself back in that situation again. It's just, it's you know how it's going to be perceived. It's very much Peter's thing, and I can't.
That's not
I just
really
think
fair.
it'd be nice to sort of round off the whole event, really, just with something, even if it wasn't.
Well, we felt we rounded it off quite happily before. Last time we played, or the previous time, or the one before that, And Milton Keynes kind of wrapped up the Peter era, if you like, for us. I think you can go on doing things forever, and there's certainly groups, Yes are going out and doing very well these days. Getting surprisingly good reviews, actually.
Even Jethro Tull are still getting good reviews as well. After 35 years.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, there are these groups. Yeah, well, you say the original lineup of Yes, but it's not really. Obviously, I mean, they've got
the classic lineup, should we say?
Well, it hasn't got. Well, I don't know what you call the classic lineup. I would say certainly should have Bill in it, and I would put Tony Kay in that myself, as opposed to Rick Lightman.
It's a controversial statement.
I think it was the sound on that album, the Yes album, with that distorted organ was the great thing about them. I think I was never, obviously I know Rick was a great player, but I prefer Tony Kay because he was simpler. He was just he was more sort of fat in there. It seemed to sort of work for me better. But I'm not a great, fantastic fan of Yes. Yeah, so.
I think it's a shame calling on stations that you didn't go on to do a second album.
Well, I quite wanted to do it. Actually. I wasn't keen to do the first one, but then I was quite keen once we'd done one to do the second one. Yeah. And Mike persuaded me to do, in many ways, persuaded me to do the Calling on Stations project, and I thought, well, why not? Let's give it a go. And I thought once we'd done it, I thought, well, we should do another one. Yeah. Because I thought we were sort of learning a bit how to use Ray's voice and everything. It certainly warranted another one, but Mike wasn't keen. I think he felt that there was a very very big fall in sales, if you like, and also was bad. The response was pretty variable. We had also quite a bit of stick because of I don't know when we did that tour. Everyone thought that the posters were done so that it looked like Peter on stage, which was nothing to do with us. But and we just thought, I can't bother with all this. I really can't. I mean, it just I mean, we didn't need it.
Sure, I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
And we could do things on our own, and like Mike's obviously done Mike Mechanics a couple of albums since then, and also I've had a chance to do this classical thing, and I just think comes a time, really, and probably it's possible that we've worked out what Mike and I can do together might have run its course now. I don't know really. It's a sort of if we're going to work in that way where we're both writing at the same time. If we want to do things where we play on each other's pieces like we did in some in the early days, that's slightly different, I think. But it's a certain way of writing that I did feel sometimes when I was doing conversations that I'd really run out of ways of just when you're playing chords against a sort of a repeated riff or bass or something. There's only so many chords you can use. And I thought, I've done this too many times, and I just can't do this again.
It sounds an obvious question. Did you miss Phil's involvement?
I did very much. I needed someone. Lots of things. Well, Phil obviously to have someone who's singing at the same time, also rhythmically, obviously, was much more inventive. But it's just another person. What we found with Mike and I, the way we were still trying to write like we had done as a 5-piece, but with two of us, and. One guy is sort of so plugged down to sort of trying to hold the whole thing, some sort of basis, that the other guy's then going mad, and it doesn't kind of quite work. Whereas you've got three of you doing it, it sort of seems to work better. Even if it's just, in the case of Phil, he tended to pretty much always stick with just either singing or playing drums, But it just gave us that greater flexibility and also, he had certain things, and obviously he had his own qualities, and I think it fitted in. We had a very good way of working, it sort of perhaps slightly emphasised the sort of simpler end of what we did, but it kind of it was an easy way of working. We did it for obviously many years, and it seemed to come very easily. We were certainly never lacking ideas, particularly for Invisible Touch and We Can't Dance. We had so many ideas. We came in the studios with nothing, and just sort of things just come all the time. So that was really entertaining thing to do, and as you see, all the tracks that were left off, even things like Shoreline and stuff. And I'm sure we could have done it again, but it's just, I think I was surprised that Phil didn't leave a long time before, because once you've got the other options, why not? But
it's been one heck of a journey, hasn't it? Really.
Yeah.
When you
look
back,
a lot of things. Yeah. Well, that's right.
I think it's fantastic that this new venture is around the corner. I hope it's successful for me, Tony. I really do.
We really do. We wish you all the best with it.
Yeah, well, it's, one always starts off with great hopes and you have to accept what comes, really.
Yeah, that's it.
As you get older, it's easier in some ways. All right,
I think
that's fine.
I can see where you get your inspiration.
Yeah.
That's super.
You wouldn't mind posing for a couple of photographs at all?
Sure. Yeah.
And do you want to get? You've got a couple of bits in the.
Just a couple of things to sign.
If you don't
That's
mind.
fine.
That'll be all right.
Yeah.
Turn this off. Turn that off.